Hello, everyone, and welcome to the continuation of Mike's vinyl collection sidebar series, where I am going through my entire vinyl collection up to this point. I've had a couple videos at this point. We're actually winding down in terms of the collection I have currently, but I needed to get to this one at some point, which is things that just kind of fall under the camp of rock in my collection. Now, I had a metal collection video. This stuff, while some of it can get heavy, I would argue it's more just in like your general classic rock camp, things that you would hear on your general classic rock radio station. And it's quite a thick stack. So much so, in fact, that I've actually had to break this up into two parts. This first video is going to be any sort of album that falls within the 60s and 70s. I don't think any of these albums are earlier than the 60s, but they fall within those two decades. Everything else will be in my next video, which will be 80s and onward. I'll just let you know right now, this first video is going to be probably double the length of the next one, just because, I mean, I'm looking at this stack and it's kind of big. So there's a lot of records to get through. As always, I'm just going to rattle them off, give some opinions, give some thoughts and feelings. I think very few of them have any sort of special thing to them. If I remember that they do, I'll showcase the vinyl itself. A lot of this stuff, though, is just stark black vinyl, so nothing really to look at other than the album covers and talking about them. So, like I said, this is going to take a while, so strap in, get a drink, get some food if you need to, and let's get to it, as it were. We'll start off with one of the earlier records, at least in the 60s era, and that would be Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. Again, arguable if this is rock per se. I'm going to argue it is, though. It sort of falls in that early like Beatles-ish camp. I do want to point out as well, we actually have a lot of Beatles vinyl. When I say we, I mean me and my fiance. It's her collection, though, right? Any Beatles records we get, I just put in her collection. Not that I'm not a fan of the Beatles. I obviously love the Beatles, but it's in her stuff. We have not completed that collection. Maybe one day if we do, I'll do a video on that. But if I added all our Beatles vinyl to this video, it would add another 10 minutes. So I wasn't going to do it. But with Pet Sounds, I actually think, and a lot of people think this as well, this is as good as a lot of stuff the Beatles did. I don't think it's quite as good as Abbey Road, but any other Beatles record, I'd say this easily puts up a fight, and a very good one. I mean, there's so many good songs on here. Wouldn't It Be Nice? God Only Knows. Sloop John B. Just wasn't made for these times. Like, so much good stuff. And in fact, Paul McCartney even said that he thinks that God Only Knows is like the perfect song. And as far as like a pop rock song is concerned, I'm kind of inclined to agree. I think God Only Knows is just like perfectly constructed, perfectly done, perfectly performed. All of it's beautiful. I will say, I think the album cover is really stupid. It's like that corny sort of random cover you find in this era of music, but don't let the cover be the judge of what actually is in this record. It's really brilliant. And obviously a lot of people think so. I mean, it's topped Rolling Stone's 500 greatest rock records, or excuse me, 500 greatest albums of all time. Every list I've seen from Rolling Stone that have done that, it's been in the top 10 of every single one. So it speaks a lot to how good it is. Moving on from there, had the vinyl slip out. Jimi Hendrix. It's funny because, you know, the Jimi Hendrix Experience is obviously a band led by Jimi Hendrix himself. And it's one of those things where I'm not a huge mega fan of Jimi Hendrix. Obviously, I'm a fan. You kind of, if you're a fan of rock, you kind of have to be a fan of Hendrix. But I couldn't tell you who these two other guys are. I obviously know Hendrix. There's a lot of great material on here. Whoever these other two guys are fantastic. You know, you think it would say their names on the back, but it does not. So, but you've got songs like Purple Haze, Hey Joe, The Wind Cries Mary, Fire, Foxy Lady, like so many good stuff, so many good tracks on this record. It's fantastic. It's phenomenal. It's a great piece of rock, and it's a great progenitor of what would come in the eras that followed. So good stuff. But that is the only Jimi Hendrix I have, because I haven't really gone out to seek much. I would have, is Electric Ladyland? Is that the name of it? Or Abraxas? There's a lot of good stuff. And I'm not the biggest Jimi Hendrix fan, so please forgive me for not knowing immediately off the top all the names of their albums, but good stuff. I'm actually now going to go into a prog rock series. And what I mean by that is that the next couple records are all falling in that camp. Kind of just how the stack fell. And in my opinion, one of the great prog rock metal albums, I said metal, but one of the great prog rock albums is, of course, King Crimson's debut work, In the Court of the Crimson King. I mean, it's only 5 tracks, And yet what they do in those 5 tracks is just absolutely fantastic. I'll actually take this one out of its sleeve, because the cool thing about this, it is gatefold, and being the sort of prog rock weirdos that they were, the artwork is very, crazy, weird, sort of like got a Pink Floyd vibe. But the cool thing is that the outer gatefold actually creates a full image of the art piece in question. And so, pretty cool stuff, pretty cool packaging. But yeah, the 5 songs on here, I mean, they're amazing. You start off with 21st Century Schizoid Man, incredible. I Talk to the Wind, Epitaph, Moonchild, and In the Court of the Crimson King are all fantastic, and they all do different things. And even Moonchild, that's like 16 minutes long, that like extended instrumental section that's like 10 minutes of the 16, it's weird, it's zany, it's odd, and yet its ending, like what it concludes on, is one of the most gorgeous things I've ever heard. I actually did a sound design for a production of Waiting for Godot at one of my local theaters, and I used Moonchild, that like instrumental bit, to serve as the intermission music. And if you know Waiting for Godot, it's a very strange, weird, odd show, but often regarded as one of the greatest American plays ever written. And so that vibe of like weird, zany, odd, I don't know where I am, I don't know what's going on, like this album definitely fits that. And then its heavy moments are so heavy. I mean, 21st Century Schizoid Man goes so hard. It's like titanium being thrust upon you. It's fantastic. It's a great, fantastic record. The unfortunate thing about King Crimson is that I'm actually not really a fan of any other stuff. I've tried to listen to it. It just doesn't nearly do anything for me in terms of like what In the Court of the Crimson King does. But that record is just, it's so good. I wish their entire discography was that good. Unfortunately, in my opinion, it's just not quite as good. Speaking of Pink Floyd, if you're watching the video, I don't even need to say anything. You should know this is Dark Side of the Moon. A lot of people would say this is a must-have in any vinyl collection. I'm inclined to agree. There's a reason it's often regarded as like one of the greatest albums of all time. There's a reason the image is so iconic. Do I think it's Pink Floyd's best record? No, I don't. And if you listen to our album Fight Club on this record and the next one I'm about to show you, you'll know that I am more partial to this next record, while Cody is more partial to Dark Side of the Moon. And as I expressed on that episode, the thing for me really is songs like Great Gig in the Sky and On the Run. They just kind of are a little too pretentious for me. On the Run is a song that could be a minute long and you get the point. Instead, it's like 3 minutes long, and it's like, why does this need to be 3 minutes? They're up their own ass at sometimes, but the rest of the songs on here, I mean, you got some of their best songs: Time, Money, Us and Them, Eclipse, like so many great, fantastic moments on this record. So while I think it is amazing and a fantastic piece, I don't think it's their best, nor do I think it's perfect like some people think. What's better for me is, of course, Wish You Were Here. I think this record does what Dark Side of the Moon is trying to do, which is have some sort of concept and really run with it in a great way. I think every moment on here is phenomenal. In particular, the duo of the bookends of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, basically part 1 and part 2. Probably their greatest achievement as a band, in my opinion, is that. And then the songs that are in the middle of that, including Have a Cigar, Wish You Were Here, Welcome to the Machine. I think all of it is fantastic. I don't think there's many pretentious moments on here, as opposed to Dark Side, of course. And for many, many, many years, I'm talking like a solid decade, this was my favorite Pink Floyd record. But as I continue to listen to Pink Floyd, and as I continue to mature and develop as a person who consumes music, a funny thing happened where Animals actually became my favorite Pink Floyd record. And I'm not quite sure what it is, because a lot of what this record does is a lot of the same thing Wish You Were Here was doing. This sees the shift of Roger Waters really like taking on the mantle of leading Pink Floyd, which we would see continue into The Wall. In my opinion, it kind of goes a little too far once you get to The Wall and further. But I think here is like the perfect blend of like Roger Waters picking up the flag and the rest of the guys also hoisting it up with him. I think in later records he like swats their hands away and says, "No, it's my flag," and like lifts it up himself, and that's where Pink Floyd, for me at least, starts to have serious problems. But man, another record where it's 5 songs, arguably it's 3, because Pigs on the Wing 1 and 2 are like, they're cute, they're nice, and they're lovely, but it's, they're like a minute and a half each. It's like the intro and the conclusion. What really makes up this record is the 3 middle songs with Dogs, Pigs, and Sheep. And I know I said that Shine On You Crazy Diamond is probably their greatest achievement as a band, but when you hit that run of those 3 middle songs, basically the entirety of this record, man, they do so much good stuff. I think Dogs is probably my favorite. It's just got so much great moments in it. That particular like mellow section where you hear like the dogs barking and howling, and it's just like the boom, 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 and then they go into like that locked groove. Oh my God, it's so good. It's fantastic. Many days, this is my favorite. I think some days Wish You Were Here slightly edges it out, but majority of days, this is the one that's at the top for me, at least as far as Pink Floyd is concerned. And like I said, I don't have The Wall on vinyl. I like The Wall, but for me, it's the same problem as the White Album from the Beatles, which is half of it is like their best material, the best stuff they ever wrote. And the other half of it is just like kind of boring to kind of bad, I'm sorry to say. So if The Wall was like a third of the length that it is, or rather 2/3, right? Shave off a third of it and keep 2/3 of it, I think it might be their best record. Unfortunately, it's not. And I say the same thing about the White Album. I think it's like 6 songs too long, maybe even 10, honestly. But I think The Wall's fine. Everything after that is kind of like, I don't really care. I think some of the David Gilmour stuff on like Momentary Lapse of Reason, it's good, but the Division Bell's okay. Like, what's really great is Dark Side, Wish You Were Here, Animals. That's my Pink Floyd, if I'm going to use that term. Continuing on with prog rock sensibilities, one of my favorites, Jethro Tull, Thick as a Brick. Probably my favorite prog rock example of like an album that's just a song. It's one song. It's broken up in half because, as a vinyl is, you can only put so much record on one half of a record, and you got to flip it over. But if you listen to digital versions of this, obviously it fades out and then fades in because that's how they did it with this. But easily, it's just one song. It's a 45-minute song, and I adore it. I think this is one of the greatest things. Not only do I think it's the greatest thing Jethro Tull ever did, I think it's one of the greatest achievements in prog rock, and it's not nearly talked about enough, at least in my opinion. I think it should be talked about much more. But it's fantastic. I love the packaging. I think the story is fun, the concept that's going on here, and the performances throughout it are so good. That drum solo that like is towards the beginning of side 2 is just unbelievable. And of course, when Ian does all the flute stuff, it's so brilliant, right? Cody once made the comment, every single piece of rock needs saxophone in it. I'll say every piece of rock needs flute in it, because a good rock flute from Ian Anderson, you don't get much better than that. So I do also have Aqualung, which of course is another infamous Jethro Tull record, probably their biggest record because it's got their biggest hits on it. Aqualung, Cross-Eyed Mary, where is it? My God, Locomotive Breath, like fantastic stuff. I think it's a good record. It's not my favorite. Obviously, Thick as a Brick is. And they weren't quite going for the prog thing here, but it's still kind of there. And beyond this and Thick as a Brick, Jethro Tull, they've got good stuff. Like Passion Play is cool. There's other stuff that's good. But really for me, it's just Aqualung and Thick as a Brick. Those are the records that I'm like, when I want to hear Jethro Tull, I want to hear those two. I don't really want to go further out than that. This is actually my father's favorite band, so a lot of Jethro Tull that I was introduced to was because of him, and I am grateful for that because obviously it's great music and it's great stuff. Once more, into the prog camp, we have Yes with the Yes album. I think I got this for really cheap somewhere, which is why I have it. Not to say it's not good, but it's one of those records that like I kind of just have it because it was cheap. I like Yes. The record I'm about to talk about, I like way more than this one, but this one definitely has its moments. There's some good stuff on here. In particular, I think it's Starship Trooper that I'm a big fan of. It might be that, or I've seen All Good People. there's good songs on here, but I'm not super well versed in it enough to say like, oh, this is definitely like one of my favorite prog metal, or I keep saying prog metal, one of my favorite prog rock records of all time. So I have it. It's good. But when it comes to yes, what really does it for me is Closer to the Edge, which I don't have, but also Fragile. Fragile, I think, is pretty phenomenal. In particular, and of course, if you're a Yes fan, you probably know I'm about to say that Roundabout is probably my favorite song by them. The bass is amazing. The keys are amazing. The performances throughout are amazing. It's been memed to hell and back. But I think it also speaks to how good it is because it's so in the canon, in the sphere. Beyond that, again, I think it's a good record. I prefer it more than their Yes album, their debut. I prefer it more than that. But it's also one where it's like, okay, I'm really here to hear Roundabout. Other moments on here I think are great, but like it's not one I revisit all the time. But it's good, and I'm glad that I do have it. So thus concludes the prog rock section of this video. From here, we're just going to talk about general rock records again that I have in the collection. One of which, of course, is Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, another record that you kind of just need to have in your vinyl collection, especially if you're a fan of rock. I'm inclined to say this is one of the greatest rock records of all time. So much good stuff on here. I mean, Dreams, Never Going Back Again, Go Your Own Way, Songbird, The Chain, I Don't Want to Know, like so much good stuff. The one issue I have with this album is that Dreams should have been the first song. Secondhand News is a good song, but Dreams is such a better opener for this album. I sometimes forget that Secondhand News is even the opening of this album, because Dreams is like such a good opener. I don't know why they just didn't put that at number one, and Secondhand News can be part like the second song. I don't know, but I didn't make the record. It's still amazing. It's still fantastic. It's still phenomenal, in spite of the fact that I have a little bit of issue with how it's paced. But it's amazing. So who am I to say? Up next, I have Aerosmith's greatest hits. Among many of they've released like 5 greatest hits records. The thing with Aerosmith is I love Aerosmith. At one time in middle school, they were actually my favorite band. That's partially because Aerosmith Guitar Hero was a thing. But the thing about Aerosmith is that I don't think they have a phenomenal record under their belt. Like, they've got great songs. I mean, the songs on here are all amazing. Like, they've got amazing rock hits, but they don't have an amazing record. Right? You think of Toys in the Attic, and it's like, I mean, it's good, but it's not great. Think of, I can't even think of half the records. There's the one with like the diamonds on the front or the jewels on the front. It's got great songs on it, but overall, it's not a great record, in my opinion. And so, when it comes to their greatest hits, which is taking all their best songs and putting it on one record, this is amazing. It's phenomenal. But if you told me, hey, what's your favorite Aerosmith record, and you can't pick the greatest hits record, I mean, I don't know. I can't pick one because I don't think any of them are like, oh, that's clearly the best one because it's got all the best songs on it. It's not the case. But as far as their hits are concerned, yeah, I mean, it's Aerosmith. It's Dream On. It's Back in the Saddle. It's Sweet Emotion. It's like all this amazing stuff they had. The next couple records will be from Led Zeppelin because I have a few of them. Of course, you start with Led Zeppelin 1, and hot take here perhaps, but Led Zeppelin 1 is actually my favorite Led Zeppelin record. I've had some people say this is like towards the bottom of their ranking, like above Presence and In Through the Outdoor, but like probably number 6. And it's like, what are you talking about? I know a lot of this record is covers, and if you've watched or listened to any episode of Album Fight Club, you know how I feel about covers on records. But I give it a bit of leeway when it's a band and it's their first record and, you know, they're coming on the scene, especially in the era that this was. Like, a lot of bands did covers, and that's just what it was. And the thing about Led Zeppelin is that these covers are like fucking unreal. Some of these are so good. You Shook Me, for example. Amazing. That trade-off of the guitar solo, the harmonica solo, like, so good. And the key solo as well. There's so much good stuff on here, and it's so heavy. Like, for me, this is the heaviest Led Zeppelin ever was, and I wish they stayed this heavy throughout their whole career. Obviously, the records we're about to talk about are also amazing, and they've got heavy moments, but like, Led Zeppelin 1 heavy is not Led Zeppelin 2 heavy or Led Zeppelin 4 heavy. It's heavier. It's the heaviest they ever were. And as a fan of very heavy music, Led Zeppelin 1 is just my number one when it comes to Led Zeppelin. Now, once again, that's to say that that's not that Led Zeppelin 2 is bad and what follows from here is bad. It's just not my favorite. But when you've got songs on here like Whole Lotta Love and Moby Dick and Heartbreaker, I mean, there's so many good songs on here and so much good stuff that when people put this above Led Zeppelin 1, I'm not entirely shocked. But it's just not quite as hard hitting for me. Obviously, though, it's still amazing. It's still fantastic. They do that thing where they put nothing on the back. It's an interesting choice for a lot of these bands, but that's what they choose to do. Led Zeppelin 2 is great. It's just a continuation of why this band is amazing. They obviously hit their quote-unquote pinnacle, a lot of people would say, in like 2 albums from now, which, I mean, why don't we just talk about it? We go from Led Zeppelin 2 to Led Zeppelin 4, not Led Zeppelin 3. Do you hate when, you watch a vinyl collection video and someone has like a lot of the records, but then they skip one or they don't have one? I don't have Led Zeppelin 3. Again, not that I dislike it. I just am not a huge fan of it. I think it's okay. Obviously, Immigrant Song's amazing, but it's not one of their best for me. Led Zeppelin 4, though, is obviously one of their best. The amount of iconic material on this thing, Black Dog, Stairway to Heaven, obviously. But for me, the real winner, the real capstone, my favorite Led Zeppelin song of all time is the closing track, When the Levee Breaks. That Bonham drum beat is something else, dude. And the performances throughout the whole thing, the groove is absolutely 10 out of 10 material. It's so good. The harmonica rages on it. All the performances are amazing. And as a closing track, it just feels so good being a closing track, right? You get to the end of the album, and the second that Bonham drum beat kicks in, you're just like, oh man, I'm ready to sail into the sunset with this thing. And you do, and it's amazing. And when people say this is the best Led Zeppelin record, I totally get it. I'm not inclined to argue with that because it makes a great statement for itself. When people tell me that Houses of the Holy is the best Led Zeppelin record, I'm inclined to also agree because this thing's also amazing. You see, the problem with Led Zeppelin is they've got like 4 absolutely phenomenal, amazing albums. Some would argue 3, but whatever, right? For me, Houses of the Holy is also amazing. It's great. Fantastic stuff here. You've got Dire Maker, or Jur Maker is apparently what the actual alliteration of it is. The song remains the same. Ocean, which is another great album closer and has a lot of similarity to When the Levee Breaks in that drum beat. It's got a great groove. It's good the whole way through. But really, I think the standout song for a lot of people here is No Quarter. No Quarter is phenomenal. In fact, the Tool cover of No Quarter, I think, is also phenomenal. Maybe I might get the edge to the Led Zeppelin original, not cover. But yeah, man, when people say that this one's great and it's their favorite, I'm like, I can see that. I'm not going to argue with that. I think this thing's also amazing and it's great and it's wonderful and I love everything about it. But unfortunately, those are the only Led Zeppelin records I have. It's a collection I would like to complete. The only Led Zeppelin record I don't like is In Through the Outdoor. I think it's kind of bad at times. And not to say that the fact that they ended after that was a good thing. Obviously, Bonham died, and that's the reason they called it quits. But they ended on a note where I was like, okay, if you're going to end somewhere, this is probably the place to do it because Presence is good. Achilles' Last Stand and Nobody's Fault But Mine, I think, are incredible songs. But you hear that album and you go like, okay, the momentum's kind of drawing down here, isn't it? And then you hear In Through the Outdoor and you're like, yeah, it's really hitting a stagnant point. Not to say they couldn't have come out with another great album after that, but man, was it really going like downhill, I guess is the word to say. So the fact that they did break up eventually after that, I mean, at least they have really great records that we can listen to and can love. But enough about Led Zeppelin. Let's move on. Deep Purple, Machine Head. I unfortunately do not have In Rock. If those know that we did an Album Fight Club episode on Deep Purple and it was Machine Head versus In Rock. I am more partial to In Rock just a little bit because Machine Head obviously is incredible. Highway Star, Space Truckin', Smoke on the Water is on this thing. Like so much good material. Cody's favorite song of all time, Lazy, apparently is on this thing. But for me, it's quintessential rock music and it is fantastic. I've really no qualms with it. But In Rock for me just kind of hits something a little bit more ferocious that I like from Deep Purple. Both of these records are part of Mach 2 Deep Purple, which, as I said on the album Fight Club, I think is one of the greatest lineup of musicians in any band ever. Like, just phenomenal stuff here. Very, very good. If you've never heard it, obviously I think you should, because I'm sure you've heard at least one or two of the songs on here, even if you're not familiar with the band itself. And the only other Deep Purple I have is actually Made in Japan. A lot of people say one of the greatest live records of all time. I think it's very, very good. I found it, if you can see, for like $13 at a local record store. So at that price point, I had to pick it up. It's in good quality. It's a very good time period for the band. It's like right after Machine Head, so like you've got all the good stuff on it. Highway Star, Child in Time, Lazy's on here, Space Truckin's on here, Smoke on the Water's on here. Like a really good lineup of songs. Amazing performances throughout. There's a reason this thing is lauded as like one of the best live albums ever. So it's part of the collection. I would like to have more Deep Purple, as I would like to have a lot of these bands continuing discography. I've only got so much money, though. Another shout out to Cody. I would never have bought this record if we did not just do the episode on this, but Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run. As I mentioned on that episode, I listened to this thing, I adored it, and I wanted it immediately, and I found it for $13. And I was like, yep, I'm grabbing that, because if you find any vinyl under 20, in my opinion, and you like it, you should immediately buy it. For me, this thing's amazing. I have not versed myself in anything Bruce Springsteen other than Born to Run, Darkness on the Edge of Town, and his like known hits, like Born in the USA, obviously. But like I said on that episode, I'm inclined to think there is nothing better than Jungle Land in terms of Bruce Springsteen's catalog. It is absolutely phenomenal. It is an amazing closer, and it's on an amazing album. I think this thing's fantastic. The performances from everybody, but in particular, the side performances, and what I mean by that is like people you don't expect in a rock band, the saxophone player, the piano player, like they really bring their A game here, as does everybody else, admittedly. I think it's amazing. I think Darkness on the Edge of Town, the follow-up, is good. I don't think it's great, but Cody would tell you otherwise. So if you want more deeper explanation onto why that is and other Bruce Springsteen talk, feel free to listen to our episode if you have yet to do so. I still got some records to go. So like I said, this is going to be a long one. The history of Eric Clapton. Again, found this cheap. I don't remember how cheap, but I found it cheap. I'm not a huge Eric Clapton fan. I'm a fan of Cream. In particular, Sunshine of Your Love, I think, is an absolutely phenomenal song. Obviously, Layla, the good stuff from Eric Clapton is great. But this is just your general greatest hits, history of good stuff in his catalog. And it is good stuff, admittedly. I think he's, a great musician, a great guitar player. He should get all the flowers that he deserves. But it's also been the kind of thing where it's just not been an artist that I've been hugely into, hugely immersed in. So while it is good and I do have it, it's not one I visit often. But if you are an Eric Clapton fan and you think he's one of the greats, be sure to roast me in the comments and tell me that he's amazing. How can you not like him, and how can you not have everything he has on vinyl? I don't know. You know how much stuff there is on vinyl that I could have that I don't and that I really want? There's a lot. Eric Clapton, he's not high up on there, right? If I see a cheap Eric Clapton record, of course I'll buy it. But like, it's got to be cheap, Santana, the original first self-titled debut. I'm just talking about legends at this point. A lot of the people featured in this video are absolute rock legends. Santana, of course, is up there with them. This is not my favorite Santana record. Is it called Abraxas? I feel like Jimi Hendrix also has an album called Abraxas, but I could be wrong. Or maybe his is Axis of Love. I don't know, right? The second one that has Black Magic Woman on it, I think it's his second record, if I'm not mistaken. That one is unreal. That's such a good record. This one's also a very good record, but this is another episode of like, I found this cheap somewhere, picked it up, love it. I think it's great, but I really wish I had, I swear it's called Abraxas. I really wish I had Abraxas, because that's definitely my favorite Santana record. It's great though. If you haven't listened to this, I would recommend it highly. I think it's phenomenal, but there's certain albums that, maybe take the spotlight when it comes to Santana. Edgar Winter Group. If you can see the sticker, this was a $6 purchase, and at that point, how can you not? Edgar Winter is a weird dude. I'm not a huge fan of the album cover. I think it's a little odd, and just given his context, I think he's weird. But you've got great songs on here. Frankenstein, in particular, I really love. Is Free Ride's on here. So good stuff, good singles, good famous Edgar Winter stuff on here. Not everything on here is a winner for me, but overall, I do think it's a good record, and it's one that I do have in my collection, because when you see vinyl at $6 and you even have a passing notice of who that person is, you should just buy it at that point. Another band we have talked about in Album Fight Club itself, which is the Eagles. This is volume 1 of their greatest hits. We did an album on this and volume 2 going up against each other. We both came to the pretty clear conclusion that volume 1, I think, is just better. This is one of the highest selling records of all time, if not like the highest selling up to a certain point in the history of the world with music. But you just listen to this thing, and the lineup of Take It Easy, Witchy Woman, Lion Eyes, Already Gone, Desperado, One of These Nights, Tequila Sunrise. Like, it's every song on here is so goddamn good. In particular, for me, One of These Nights is probably my favorite Eagles song. I think it's just absolutely amazing. So it's good to have this. This is another one where, like, you can't really go wrong unless you just dislike the Eagles or dislike rock music in general. Then I probably wouldn't recommend it, but they're great for a reason. They're lauded for a reason. Part of that reason is because shortly after releasing Volume 1, they released Hotel California, which is easily their most famous record. It's got their most famous song, the aptly titled Hotel California, which a lot of people say is one of the greatest rock songs of all time. I'm definitely with that camp. I think it is one of the greatest rock songs of all time. But if you remove Hotel California from this record, what do you have? You've got, of course, it doesn't say on the back. You've got, Life in the Fast Lane on here. And you've got some okay songs. But to call this thing one of the greatest rock records of all time, nope, I don't see it. Again, I think the song Hotel California is one of the greatest rock songs of all time. I will absolutely give that to anybody. But when somebody comes to me, like the Rolling Stones, for example, and says this is in like the top 50 greatest albums of all time, absolutely not, right? It's got great stuff, but are you really going to tell me this is one of the 50 greatest rock albums? Not even rock albums. They say one of the greatest albums ever, like top 50. No. Legacy, maybe. Influence, maybe. But content? No. Like I said, if you remove Hotel California, the song from this record, you've got an okay record at best. And at times it's just like, whatever. Like, I'm inclined to just like kind of skip some of these songs. Not that they're bad, but it's not nearly as good as, like, for example, their greatest hits. And I know their greatest hits isn't exactly the best comparison because it's a greatest hits record, but like, listen to all those songs and you go, man, all of these are killer. And then listen to Hotel California and you go, yeah, some of this is killer, but not nearly all of it. Paul McCartney's Band on the Run. A friend actually gifted this to me for free, which is very nice of her. And it's great. It's got great songs on it. Jet, Band on the Run is, I guess not. Sorry, my box of vinyl is currently tipping over, so I'm going to move it a little bit. It's fantastic. It's great. It's not as good as the Beatles, just overall, which is the unfortunate thing with the Beatles' career, all four of them. I think after the Beatles, they all had decent careers to good careers, but none of them had like as good of music as the Beatles had. So, and of course, you can't really remove yourself from being in the greatest rock band of all time with the Beatles, a lot of people would say. So for George, John, Ringo, and Paul to make their own careers or try to make their own careers, it's like, yeah. But you were in the Beatles, though. Like, remember all that? Remember Abbey Road? Remember Sgt. Pepper? And it's like, yes, I'm sure they do. It's good. It's not phenomenal. It's just okay, I guess is how I'd put it. But it's in my collection. I have it, and I'm not mad about that. Especially when someone just gifted it to me for free. I mean, that's awesome. Continuing on, we're getting towards the bottom here, so we're almost done. And I'm trying to fix this. Yeah, this box is... One moment, please. My box was falling by the wayside, so I had to try and course correct it. I believe we only have 2 records left, so I will get through these 2. So Boston, their opening, debut, self-titled, etc. I think this is great, dude. This is a record where I think, like, top to bottom, it's pretty damn good. To come out with more... Side 1, let me just read off side 1 for you. More Than a Feeling, Peace of Mind, Foreplay Long Time. Like, that's a perfect side 1 of a record. And to think that this is their first record, too. Like, this is their debut. It's wild. It's crazy. Other songs on here though, like Hitch a Ride is good. Let Me Take You Home Tonight, I'm a fan of, but like that first side, that side A is like pretty damn good. So I have it. It's good. I like it a lot. Big fan. But last, and certainly not least, in fact, this is one of my favorite rock records of all time, and I don't think it nearly gets enough praise for what it is. And that would be Supertramp's Breakfast in America. Man, this thing, like, I don't understand how people don't think this is one of the greatest rock records ever, or just in general, one of the greatest albums ever, right? You want to throw Hotel California in the top 50, but you're not going to throw this in the top 50? Like, what are you on? What are you smoking? I'm not saying this is nearly as popular as Hotel California. Obviously not. But like, for me, it's infinitely better than Hotel California. First thing I want to talk about is the packaging is such a cool image, right? The lady being the Statue of Liberty, and the whole of New York City is like breakfast themed, Breakfast in America. Like, so creative, so good. And in fact, it won the Grammy for packaging that year, as it should have. And then you have the band on the back, like eating breakfast. Like, that's so good. Such good, like, imagery and packaging. And then you turn the thing on and you start listening to it. Again, you want another perfect side A of a record? Here you go. Gone Hollywood, The Logical Song, Goodbye Stranger, Breakfast in America, into Oh Darling. You flip it and it goes into Take the Long Way Home. And it's like that run is unfuckawithable, right? It's so good. So good. From there, Lord Isn't Mine, Just Another Nervous Wreck, Casual Conversations. It's all good. Like, it's fine. I don't hate it at all. But it does start to lose the steam of like that first half and Take the Long Way Home. And you're like, man, you guys were like on 10 out of 10 energy this whole way through. And then you got to like the middle portion of side B, and it's like, man, you kind of winding it down. I guess that's the end of the record. I guess that's all they got. No. Because then they end the record with Child of Vision, which is easily my favorite Supertramp song and easily one of the best rock songs I think nobody talks about. Like, do they just bring all the stops? Excuse me. All the stops on Child of Vision. It is so good. Everything about it. And like I said, I think this is a 10 out of 10 record, really, at the end of the day. That middle section of side B, yeah, it's not as good as side A. But side B is booked end to hell with Take the Long Way Home and Child of Vision. Like, you don't really get better bookends than that, even if the middle stuff is just like good, not even great. So I adore it. I don't think it nearly gets enough praise for what it is. And I hope that in the years to come, people like revisit this record and rediscover this thing. I think it needs to be talked about because it's truly one of the greats. So yeah, that is albums in my rock collection as far as my vinyl collection goes. Like I said, it was a little bit of a long one. The next video will not nearly be as long, and that will be rock between 80s and now. I expect that the video to be like half the length of this one. So expect that video soon. Until then, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Continue to be you, and I'll see you on the next one.